Well, welcome back to the second part of our what we call the fifth missionary journey of Paul. And so, just as a quick review, he has been released from Rome and he is going to the east to visit these churches and the people. I don't want to think of it as just churches in a building. He's visiting people, and we gave you a little hint of the journey yesterday, but today we're really going to go city by city. And hopefully, you are seeing a big map on your screen. This is the same map that is on your outline. And we're just, Gary, we're just going to start by going. He was released from Rome and he ends up in Crete. Uh, we,
Absolutely.
we don't know exactly how he got to Crete, the pathway he took. Did he walk over and or did he get a ship right out from a port city there? But he gets to Crete. Now, tell us a little bit about Crete because this is an interesting little island.
You bet. Well, first of all, just the thought when you get out of house arrest or any kind of detention, what better thing to do than go on a Mediterranean cruise to some Greek islands, huh? Let's do it. But I don't know whether he was thinking that or not. But anyway, they end up on Crete, and Crete is sort of one of the seeds of the full Greek and Hellenic civilization. Uh, that's where the Minoan culture back in like the Bronze Age began kind of a march around that Aegean Sea, and the Greek culture kept developing in different locations, different what would you might call it, capitals, city states, and kept spreading itself out. And this Minoan culture is the first of that fruition that we know of. And it, the art and the pottery and things like that are found in other places in on the coast. They're like Miletus. So they had spread to other islands as well north, and so Crete forms the southern boundary of that Aegean Sea area, and um, uh, rough island in some spots. There's large peaks of mountains. There's sheer cliffs in some of the coastal areas, and on the northern side, it's a little more hospitable to harbors and beaches. And Paul had been there once. We mentioned yesterday down in the south. He was in Fair Havens as they just kind of anchored there. Had a meeting of everybody. They ignored Paul, listened to other people about the sea conditions, and a few hours later, they were blowing off uh, to shipwreck. That would be days, even weeks of losing hope and not knowing where they'd end up, but at the bottom of the sea. So, uh, what would have been a few hours to Phoenix and another harbor ended up just, no hope. So, uh,
That's an interesting thing to remember. That he, this was if you take Malta out of it, this was his last, supposed to be his last stop on the way to Rome. So it's
mhm.
sort of nice that it starts there. And I was thinking about this when you're talking, and then looking at the map here. Uh, when you have an island like this, there are not usually indigenous people there.
Mm, mm,
It's
mhm.
people that have come from the mainland
Place.
to the island.
Mm.
So, you know, what connection does the mainland, and that can be Asia Minor as we know it, or also coming down the Corinth, or it's sort of sandwiched in between there. What kind of relationship does the Cretans, and that sounds really bad, doesn't it? But the Cretans have with the different cities that were on the mainland that would have made their population.
And That's one that the prehistory I'm not that versed in. You may know the answer to that, but there are those who would say it goes east, Asia
Mm.
Minor, and then on east uh, into the into the Fertile Crescent area. So that's more speculation as it goes than ever, but that's probably the case. And then with their own civilization, stories of King Minos, and that they then spread into that area that we now know as Greece, and had some effects in that Aegean Sea area. So, yeah,
Well,
it's varied history,
because I
incredible
guess
inter.
I guess what I was getting at is, didn't you find a connection between Miletus and Crete?
Well, it went the other way in that Crete, as they went north in that King Minos era of
Mhm.
prosperity and
Wow.
trade, they actually went north into the Aegean, and Miletus, yes, was one of their cultural centers. They found uh, archaeologists found the pottery there and evidence of trade, and so yes, Miletus had that heritage at least from that Bronze Age of the the peak of the civilization of the Minoan civilization.
So Paul
But it's the glory of another day.
there you
So
go.
they might have been proud of it. That's 3,000 years before Paul got there. So
Oh yeah. So Paul, he's been there, but he's coming back and he's asking Titus to come back. And I
mhm.
guess what was the importance of having Titus come to that island?
uh, well, first of all, let's roll it back just one. And there is a Jewish history to
Mhm.
the island of Crete. And the book of First Maccabees, which is in the intertestamental literature, there's a the Romans make a power play on the Seleucids and say they're going to protect all the Jews in the Mediterranean. The Seleucids had kind of been the ones who are dominant and actually have Judea in their grasp at that moment. But the Jews had made a plea to Rome, uh, and Rome said, "We will protect you in all these other areas," as Rome was starting to move east. And actually, Gortina, the provincial capital of Crete, was mentioned in a Roman emperor's decree, or the Senate, excuse me, still uh, the Roman Senate that made that decision, and they said that, yeah, we will protect the people on Crete, for instance. And so we know there's a Jewish population there of at least a few hundred years. And when Paul goes there, there's already a Christian population there too, very possibly, because Crete is the one of the places mentioned in Acts 2 at Pentecost,
Mm.
when the Holy Spirit comes and there's people in Jerusalem who they are either pilgrims that have come there and they're going back to Crete, or they are family members that have moved to Jerusalem and they have family members back in Crete that they're going to see and report to that Messiah has come. The Holy Spirit comes and they upon the apostles, and they witness this. And as it says, there's thousands who are converted that day who believe that Jesus is Messiah, and they bring it back to Crete. So they probably have a Christian population there already. And when he comes just finding whatever might be there. There might be Jewish synagogues there, no doubt. There might be Messianic Jews and Christians there. And but what they also find, which is part of the fun of it, is kind of a contentious group of people. There's a history to it, and I'll just mention, for whatever it was worth, Paul mentioned something to Titus in his letter that he'll write later. He'll
Right.
quote one of their uh, ancient poets who had said, uh, Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, and lazy gluttons. Wow, ouch. And this guy was from Crete himself, so he was, describing his home country. But uh, there's uh, a word that we use in a different way called syncretism, and the original meaning of it meant the Cretans coming together, the sync, or sin, togetherness, and then Cretan, and it meant Cretans came together when there was an attacker from the outside. But when there was no common enemy, they were at each other's throats all the time, and that's actually the Plutarch says that's the origin of that word. So it's a place where they just might have been a little more argumentative about things, it sounds like. And so when they find these churches and synagogues and people there on Crete, uh, he leaves Titus there to kind of clean this up and rise up leadership on the island. People who are of the Lord and kind of act like they're of the Lord to be new leadership. And anybody that's ever attempted come to existing congregations and the way we've always done it and try to raise up a new generation of leadership know that's not an easy task.
Nope, not at all. I mean, this little stopover at Crete is a picture of today in so many different
The
ways.
microcosm, huh?
Oh yeah.
Polarity.
So we don't know how long um, Paul stayed with Titus at Crete. I mean, there's just no reckoning of time there. But like you say, he sort of comes to Crete, gives Titus a mission, and then from all appearances, he takes a little, puddle hopper, from Crete up to Miletus. And listen, he has been at Miletus before. This is not his first go around there,
Absolutely.
because in Acts, this is one of the places that he has been before. It's sort of that gateway to the valley
Yeah.
there. So, talk a little bit about the uniqueness, because I know you had a couple of points of what Miletus was in that first century AD.
Uh, First of all, it was a thriving ancient port, as it had been many civilizations had been in and out of there, colonized it, enriched the life. So it was a multicultural background again, including the Minoans, as we mentioned, the Hittites. There's the culture from the Fertile Crescent, as they call it, further east, that were in there with the Minoans. But yeah, it just has a layer all the way to the Romans of all these civilizations that came through. But it's one of it's the gateway to that to Asia Minor, in the sense it's one of the best ports on the Aegean Sea there. Though at the time, as I pointed out, by was it about 90 to 100 AD, the silt from the river that fed it, the Menander River, filled it in, and ships started not being able to get in there. But at least at this time, it still had that uh, status as a fantastic port. And it was a meeting hub for Paul, as you mentioned. He hadn't. Uh, this was no strange place for him. The meeting with the elders from Ephesus in chapter 20 of the book of Acts, where he invites them from Ephesus to come to Miletus. Uh, that's where that takes place. Uh, then in the present, Paul's gonna, while he's in Miletus, send Timothy to Ephesus, and so Timothy's traveling with the group, and he evidently was on Crete with them, or he had Timothy meet him there in Miletus, and it just depends on how you place people and things. But we don't have an exact who was where when. But in this case, we know Timothy's there in Miletus with Paul, and he's getting sent to Ephesus. And then in the future, that's he's going to drop on a second trip here. There's a little whetting of the appetite, because he's going to be back to this area again in a few years. He's going to drop Trophimus there, who's sick, and Paul has to keep moving, but because he has a urgent time factor on this second trip. But Trophimus gets sick, and Trophimus is from Ephesus, and Miletus was considered one of the ports for Ephesus. So his family, friends, whoever needed to care for him could come take care of him there if they weren't already living there. So it's one of those places that Paul's been to, gonna be at, and a famous travel spot for a lot of people, or at least a port
Yeah.
that you're going to stop in if you're taking the coasters along the Aegean Sea.
And I think it's a good thing to talk about this for just a second because Miletus and Ephesus are very, very close to each other. It's not far away at all. Yet he doesn't turn north, to go to Ephesus from Miletus. He turns and basically goes east, off the beaten trail. And we talked a little bit about that. And we have speculated a little bit in the past, but I mean, why doesn't he go to Ephesus? Why not? I mean, it's just right there.
Yeah, there's several reasons that are possibilities. First of all, in the book of Acts, with some of his travels, remember uh, that'd be remembering from the other class, but there are times in the book of Acts where Paul was doing some funny traveling where he'd, for instance, set the guys on the boat and then he'd go walk while they met him a little later. They'd get there faster, probably than he would, and but he wanted to walk it. Well, it's been, I remember James D.G. Dunn, one of the great scholars of the book of Acts and Paul, uh, kind of put forward and with a lot of agreement that Paul was probably avoiding certain people from Ephesus, because in Ephesus he had a bad reputation, had a bad time there amongst the synagogue Jews, as well as the non Jews who saw him horning in on their God and God's worship, and the tourist trade that brought in with Artemis and the temple there. And then he's off to, when he was in Jerusalem, who recognized him in the temple and started the riot that arrested him and put him in house arrest for 5 years? Well, it was Jews from Asia Minor and Ephesus, particularly. They recognized Titus, or not Titus, but Trophimus, who's from Ephesus. So they must have been from Ephesus themselves. And so he, on his travels in the Aegean, he seems to be very careful not to get on a ship where there's people from Ephesus there, or people that might know who he is, and cause further trouble, and hold him up and put him back in incarceration. So that's I think one of the big reasons why. But then we've talked about, and you might want to talk more about that. John, the Apostle John, is in Ephesus at this point, and he's one of the original 12 apostles of Jesus. And Paul has a deference in that he says, I've been called, like he says in Romans, I've been called to places where they haven't heard about it yet. And in Ephesus, they'd heard about it already, and there was a thriving church and culture. And John now is there as the one of the inner circle for Jesus, in that inner four of James and John and Peter and Andrew. And so I'm sure it's a lot of it's deference to John in Paul's way, as well as some of the other reasons we mentioned.
And I totally agree with the idea that with John in Ephesus, and he would have been by this time very well established in Ephesus. To put us in time frame, Jesus's mom Mary basically would have died by now, and she was supposedly in Ephesus. Um, I think of the interesting part of when Paul is sailing from Crete to Miletus, just the foreshadowing that's happening, because he would have come very close to passing the island of Patmos.
Mhm,
That in
mhm,
essence, John is going to be exiled on from Ephesus. And when he takes that turn from Miletus to go to the Lycus Valley, well, he's taking that route in essence to the seven churches of Revelation. So
mhm, mhm.
it's a it's a very very interesting thing that we've got going on here, and you're right. He does not want to go to Ephesus, and he doesn't.
Yep,
He
yep.
doesn't.
So the turn, and we might mention that a little more. The turn to the east into Colossae, into
Mhm.
the Lycus Valley, is a time spent in a place where there's actually three towns. We might have mentioned that yesterday too, but Colossae is actually the smaller of the places city wise, and it's Laodicea that's the big city, and then Hierapolis there also is more of a resort area and a place people go for the hot springs. I didn't mention what it was yesterday. I just said I'd say it today, but there was a famous hot springs there that just like hot springs today, people go for medicinal purposes, for just to get away, to relax. So there was a whole industry there around the hot springs, and Hierapolis, the name is about holiness and a holy place, and so it was. There's also you know a sacredness to that area. It might have been more of the based in the pagan imagery, but nonetheless, Paul wasn't afraid of that, and that in Athens, for instance, as we saw in the book of Acts, he took it on, and knew people were at least sensing there's something sacred, there's something other, but it's that God that he believes in. It's really the ultimate, and that others are just poor imitations of. So, but I think he went there he went there and meet that church. He hadn't met them. There's part of it's his missionary funding appeals to go to Spain, somewhere that the exotic reaches of the western frontier, and also just to reacquaint himself with some of the people he'd heard about. Philemon, that's the letter where he says, "Hey, prepare a room for me. I'm coming to visit." And checking in with Philemon, with Onesimus, and that situation with the how Onesimus's slave status was being handled, and whether Paul could even have Onesimus in his ministry again. He may have been hoping to pick him up there. So we don't know, but that's one of those places where you can get away. And Paul wasn't the founder of those churches, but there were churches there, and uh, that's part of one of the letters that in that packet we talked about from Rome. There was a letter that was supposed to be given to the Laodicean church to be read, which could have been the Ephesians letter, could be a lost. Some people think it's a letter to the Laodiceans that never made it into a collection and wasn't kept. But nonetheless, it that was a place where he could minister and rest. Uh, when you get out of prison, you want to kind of reassess everything and reestablish relationships. And Epaphroditus, if they're both the same people, he was involved with founding Colossae, and so he's reconnecting and making new relationships in a church in Asia Minor that he doesn't necessarily have to worry about the ramifications like he would in Ephesus, where they were kind of out for him.
And when I think of this trip, and I try to sort of put myself in Paul's mind, Crete and Miletus seem to me that these are pure business trips. You know what I mean? We're establishing Titus there with a job, And when we go to Miletus, we're meeting with Timothy, and we're giving him a very, very similar job that Titus had in Crete, but for Ephesus. When he makes that turn and goes into Colossae, and really when he makes the loop around, which as we go through, we'll talk about, it seems to be we've switched from business trip to a little bit more of personal and, like you say, recharging trip. Colossae, we know we have a very, very personal relationship that is happening with the letter from Philemon. He's trying to make sure that that's taken care of. He's asked them to put a place together for him to stay. And yeah, it's not so bad that you're right next to a resort town, to get
Yeah.
yourself recharged. So
Mhm.
this
Exactly.
this trip to Colossae really seems like, hey, it seems like the mission has changed.
Mm.
I've
Hmm.
taken care of some stuff. It's time for me to check this personal relationship, get recharged. And like, I don't think we should discount he has in mind going to Spain. It's
Hmm.
time to get it's time to get the money. I hate to say it that way, but I mean it's time to get the resources.
Yeah, it's resources. And as we know, in a lot of these trips in the past, he would pick up people
Yeah.
who wanted to go to the mission field, who he inspired as he spoke. So again, there's so many unsaid things in both the letters and Acts, and now in these letters. So later, where there's people that may be saying, "Wow, want to be part of that. I want to go to the uncharted, to Spain, to somewhere that there's believers aren't there. There's no, well, we won't talk about too much of that, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have a lot of contact with this part of the world, and or hadn't at least in the same kind of history of civilizations, and so it was an attractive place to want to go.
And I
And
think you hit on a very key point. You have to remember when we were in Rome, he had this team together. He wrote these epistles and he sent his team out to these places.
Mhm.
And now, like you say, his trips are usually not only going out there for mission, not only going, in this case, we think to recharge, but it's to pick the team back up,
Pick the team back
because
up and maybe other people who want to join the team. Because
yep,
it seems like he's always pulling people in and building a team, and that's that personable as well as kind of following Jesus's model of not doing it by yourself, but mentoring other people to go and do likewise.
yep.
Go out into all the world, and that's a natural part of his evangelism ministry. So if I was going to redraw the map or draw my own lines on it uh, from Colossae, uh, my route, there's different routes. We don't know exactly what he did, but I'd have him come back again to Miletus. That's that Lycus River Valley and the Menander River running through there, and that would be the fastest route because there were river boats. It may be how he got up there, as well as how they came back. They could have taken roads too if they wanted to walk, but like I said, at mid 60s or so, Paul, or early 60s, it may just be nice to be able to get on another boat and go in a little faster trip. But anyway, I'd have him back in Miletus, and I'd have an arrow from Miletus over to Troas on the boats, because again, you're catching a coaster and taking it up there, and rather than uh, walking for all that distance, much easier to get back with the water and faster transportation. But who knows?
Yeah.
He could have stayed on inland and still avoided Ephesus that way.
I mean, in all honesty, we don't know, but I do tend, if you look at the places that we know he's landing at, they're all cities that are very close to ports. So if he went from Colossae back to Miletus, to get from Miletus up to Troas, very, very, very simple, relatively speaking. It's and I think we have a map in the outline. I'll have to go check, but one of the things that we looked at when we did all of our sort of speculation around routes is what are the natural trade routes, not only by road but by sea in the Roman Empire at that time, and all of these have natural trade routes that are happening. So for Paul to pick up at the port and be able to just catch a catch a strip a little ship going up there. These are all ways that they traveled,
Yeah.
that are very very natural. And
And outside of Laodicea and Colossae, there was a major sheep ranching and wool production, and there was the black uh, sheep wool that was very famous from this area. And one of the main ways that they would get the raw materials or make the cloth there and then ship it out would be through Miletus to go on to Greece and Rome for some of their biggest markets. So taking that river, or the river cruises, if you will, or there are no cruises. You took river boats that were carrying cargo down the river. Yeah, you would be following a natural transportation that was happening constantly.
now we think that he ended up in Troas before Philippi. Um, and that seems fairly natural. He seems to always find himself in Troas, and and again we're going to find him in Troas on the way back after Spain. Again, that's just a little preview hint. Now, did did we have? I don't think we had much on Troas, or did we?
Well, we didn't have a lot on Troas, but we did, as you mentioned about Paul.
Hmm.
This is where Troas was, where he has a night vision, if you will, whether it was a dream or an awake vision. But a man stands there and points his finger at Paul and says, "Come to Macedonia." And
Yep.
he had been trying to go other places on mission. And when it said, "Go to Macedonia," that's where he responded. This is where he met Luke,
Yes.
evidently, or at least Luke makes his first appearance in Troas. In the book of Acts, Troas is where Eutychus fell out of the window of a third-story uh, building, a home probably, an apartment, during one of Paul's sermons. And Paul was able to lay hands upon Eutychus, and he came back to life. There was a healing, and so I'm sure I'd want to check in on Eutychus if nothing else while I was in Troas. And he's also uh, in Second Timothy coming up in the future. He's going to mention some personal items that he left with a guy named Carpus in Troas. So this is one of those places again where he knows people. He knows he has connections there. He stayed with somebody there, and maybe it was Carpus when he was sleeping and had that night vision. There may have been a church already there, and believers is what he seems to have bumped into a church there and been able to preach and all. So uh, again, he didn't do all the church founding, but when there were Christians there, and he was able to connect, uh, he made those great connections. And Troas is one of those hub cities. Again, it was considered the gateway to Macedonia, to the other side, from the eastern part of the Aegean and Asia Minor to the western part in the Greece side of the Aegean Sea. So yeah, Troas was a big deal then.
And really from Troas to get to Philippi, because we do believe that he ended up in Philippi just because of the letter he wrote and the expectation that he had there. Again, it's a puddle jumper, for lack of a better term. We'd call it a puddle jumper, to get from Troas over to Philippi. And he Philippi had been one of those cities. Again, if he is on the raising resources to go to Spain tour, this is a church, and it's we say church, and we think of driving down Loman's Ford and seeing the buildings of Rolling Hills on one side and the Catholic Church on the. That's
Right.
not what church was. It was it was some family's house.
Mhm.
That's what church was. It was a home church. So when we say he's going to Philippi to talk with the church there, you know,
Talking about the believers who are meeting in maybe one house, or it could be multiple houses, to celebrate and worship and fellowship together.
there was no neon
Absolutely.
sign out in front. I guess
Yeah.
that's that's
No.
the you know we think of that today when we say church, but he's going to meet with the folks there in Philippi because they've supported him in the past. We know when he was in
Oh yeah.
Rome, they sent him a gift. You know,
Mhm. And think about the people he met in the Book of Acts, for instance, the international businesswoman who owned a dye and cloth business, and then the jailer at
yep,
the Philippi jail where the earthquake happened, and it shook everybody up, literally and figuratively, including the jailer, who's probably a retired Roman officer. That was often the case for jailers in a town like Philippi that has a Roman colony structure, and his whole family comes to the Lord. They could have had a house church. Lydia could have had a house church. I mean, there's any number of interesting people there that he came to relationship with. There was a slave woman who uh, had a demon go out of her, who was doing fortune telling for a living, and she probably lost her job and lost her status with her slave owners and became a destitute person possibly, but other people hopefully in the Christian church took her in and uh and allowed her to get back on her feet. So lots of stories of lives
oh
that
yeah,
we learned in the Book of Acts, and now it's later. This is 5-10 years later, that as things develop, and they still had that relationship, like you said, in Rome, sending people and funds to encourage Paul in his ministry. So
we talk about the book of Philippians when he was there, and basically Philippians was where he got. Maybe I got the wrong story. When he gets thrown in jail, and basically he comes out, and the jailer says, "Okay, you're free
mhm,
now," and he's like, "Uh-uh."
yeah,
Is that's Philippians, right?
I'd have to go back and look. But I think that's it because they were going to let him go, and then he says, "No,
You
I don't think so. You
yeah.
whipped me. You
I'm gonna
incarcerated me as
walk.
not a Roman
Yeah,
citizen."
yeah. I'm gonna walk back into jail until the magistrates come here and tell
They
me to go.
released me personally. That's right.
Yeah, I
They're going to
think
have to go face to face with me and Silas, because both he and Silas, it says in that story, were Roman citizens.
yes, that's right. That's right.
And they got mistreated bad. So
So
they had something
so
on 'em.
oh yeah, it's awesome. So again, the way that he's moving around this circle here, he is definitely, it feels like, raising funds at this point. And again, talking personally and checking in with those churches, because he leaves from Philippi, and then we believe he ends up in Corinth. And talk a little
Well,
bit about that. Do you?
can I pull us back for a minute?
Oh,
I
sure,
just
pulse
wanted to
back.
mention
Yeah.
just one of those visual things that you get to. This is one of those that I like to. This whole Aegean thing is visualized. Is the sailing from Troas to Philippi? There's some incredible islands that you
Mm,
pass on the way there. There's one called the Imbros, which Homer mentions in the Iliad. So it was very famous that way. And he called it the craggy Imbros because it's just, these kind of tough rock formations. And then Samothrace is one of the most rugged islands, and it had a peak of 5,200 feet that they named Saos, or safe, in Greece, because They knew where they were. That was like one of the landmarks for sailors in that area. And then there was an island called Thasos that was right outside of where they were going to uh, disembark. And it was beautiful pine forest, lush vegetation, green island rather than a rocky island like the others. So there was this beauty, various types of beauty of and landmarks that you end up on a city that's not there. If you notice, Philippi is not exactly on the coast; it's up a little bit on the map, and it was Neapolis, or it was New City. And this was a place, this was the actual port for Philippi. And this was one of those places that was um, a beautiful place to come yourself, because the harbor's like like arms almost reaching out. And the city had two harbors, one on each side of a middle area that was the promontory, or like a peak, and the city was built on that peak, and then the harbors came down on either side there, and it was supposedly a beautiful sight to behold as you came into that harbor. So again, just hey, we're on the Mediterranean here, and we're in the Aegean Sea, and there's something to be said about the beauty that's being experienced by the guys that are there and experiencing all of this. So I like to pause there for a moment.
Oh,
But
no,
yes,
no, no, no. I mean, we wrote about it, and before we go from Philippi down to Corinth, we would pay mucho bucks to go vacation in the Aegean Sea,
absolutely.
and this is Paul's basically stomping ground. No kidding. He would he want to go back there after four and a half years, 5 years in prison to
Yeah.
visit all these relationships, but just to get recharged before going into what is going to be the unknown for him. It's yeah, we'd pay a lot of money to vacation here.
Still, and because Paul was there,
Yeah.
there's such a tourist trade
Oh yeah.
still today to be in those places, to see those places. But it's also, not to minimize it, it's also a powerful spiritual experience for many people to walk those same paths and to be in those same places. So, I'll give a little pitch just briefly for another place. Philippi is on the Ignatian Way, and so in their packet, they have a few drawings, a three-part drawing by David Macaulay of the Roman roads being built, how they built those roads that are still there today. I mean, that's some great road building. Of course, people have been, redoing it and keeping it as best they can. But the Roman road, the Ignatian Way, was the super highway between the Aegean Sea and Italy. If you notice on the map, when things went down in like mid-November and you could not sail for the next 3 months, people made the trips on these Roman roads. And if you had good weather, you went. If you had some bad weather and a storm, you stopped where you were, but you kept on going, and you had your tent. Like Paul is the tent maker, you had your tents to, if you had to pitch. You had these waterproof wool tents often, or skin tents that kept you dry, or as dry as possible. But that was that main way from Philippi to Dyrrhachium, is the port that shows on that map, and you would be able to get over there and then take a little puddle jumper across the Adriatic to the heel of the boot of Italy. And so that was key for transportation in that day. The Roman armies, that's how they got people and goods fast to various places if they couldn't be on the sea. So yeah, it's a under appreciated city in that way. So if you get off the Ignatian Way, there's another city called Berea. And Book of Acts, you got a great reception there. One of the team that was with the seven guys that Aristarchus was with, that we talked about the other day in uh, the 20th chapter, the beginning of the 20th chapter of Acts. The first name that's mentioned gets the most uh, detail about him. It's Sopater in that particular in the book of Acts, and his formal name would be Sosipater, and that's what Paul uses. Paul always used the formal name of somebody, like Priscilla and Prisca. He'd use the Prisca actually was the formal name in that case, and Priscilla was the affectionate name or the name that everyday people would call you. And same with Sosipater, and he is a namesake of a Jewish general from uh, the much earlier days when the Greeks were ruling, and a famous battle in Judea that Sosipater was a part of. And his father is mentioned too, and when it introduces us to Sopater in Acts 20, his name's Pyrrhus, and that's a famous Greek general. So guessing military family, and maybe a couple generations there. And I really believe that Berea, being off the beaten path, it had a reputation there again as a vacation spot or a place to get away. It's at the base of a beautiful mountain range, a famous mountain there, and that's where I think he might have even written one of the letters that we're going to talk about. The Macedonia is one of the places that the letters start to be written, and then Corinth is the other place
Yeah.
that the candidates for at least one, if not both, of the letters are. But I think he's to see Sosipater, to hang out in Berea for a little while. We don't know that.
Yeah.
There's nothing said about that, but there's somebody that was important. He was on that trip to. Uh, I think he was one of the people that got him to Athens and got him out of town as security.
Yep.
And then we find him in that team that's going to go to Jerusalem with the collection that ends up with Paul getting arrested and ending up in Caesarea in house arrest. But Sosipater, probably a good reference with the Roman military, somebody who knows what's going on with the military life. Again, as we've mentioned, Paul had several relationships that way. But I got my little plug in for Berea as a possibility on the trip, though that's not mentioned in here. But knowing the history with Berea and with Sosipater, wouldn't be surprised that there was at least a little time spent there.
Yeah, I mean, all of this is possible. I mean, all of this is like logical. But part of what we get is you look at the route that we've sort of come up with, and you see other possibilities. And hey, uh, we know he gets from Philippi and down to Corinth, or at least that's sort of the general wisdom of it. How he got there, we don't know. And if he took the land route to get there, there is absolutely no doubt that he probably stopped in Berea. I mean, it's on the way. He couldn't have gotten there. He couldn't have gotten from Philippi to Corinth without going through there. So and it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense.
And from Berea, there's a I can't remember the name of the port city, but from Berea over straight east to the coast, that's how they got him to Athens. Was
Yes.
got on the boat and made sure he got to Athens and disembarked there.
Yeah.
They were making sure he was safe and out of the Thessalonians'
Yeah.
kind of hateful vengeance. So he could have even hopped over to that port again and come back down. He'd been that route once before, and so it could have been just did that little. It's a few miles off the Ignatian Way from Philippi. You go visit there, and then boom, you can be back at the coast and on a coaster down to Corinth, Cenchreae, and or the other port. There are two ports for Corinth as well.
So we know that somewhere along this road, Philippi, if he gets to Berea, he gets to Corinth, that he writes two epistles. He writes First Timothy, he writes Titus. Um, and those two epistles, the first two, what we call pastoral epistles, really are reviewing that first part of the trip, the mission trip, but you can also see that he's getting ready to launch
Mm-hmm.
because he's sitting there saying, "Hey, I know I'm going to Nicopolis to winter there. Titus, meet me there. Meet me there." So you get this idea that you know I sort of lean to the fact that he probably wrote First Timothy and Titus in Corinth because it seems like uh, Corinth is that place where he likes to write. For whatever reason it is, it seems to be that place that he sits and has the ability to write there. And so he writes those letters. He gets them off. Um, Now we've talked a little bit about Corinth, but I think we should probably, you know, give it another go because Corinth is going to play a particularly interesting role in the future, I guess.
Absolutely. You might even call it home away from home.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about it last time too. Was that's where Paul, in that Acts trip all the way down that same way, ends up in Corinth after Athens, and he goes to the tent making. There's probably a part of the market there where the tent makers all congregate, have their shops, and he ends up in Priscilla and Aquila's tent making shop, and that's where he eventually he's got a bed there. They put him up and have him stay there, as well as he's working with them and earning a living. And the shop could also be a place of meeting where you can talk and work at the same time. And it's a possibility that it was that. Oops, that kind of interaction. I just lost you, Chris.
Oh, I still see you.
You do. I just lost you. I'm not sure why. Let's see.
That's the joy of our of technology. So,
Yeah, well, I could just keep talking and pretend I can see you.
well, as long as you can hear, as well, first of all,
If I'm taping this,
you probably don't need to see me.
yeah, as long as you can hear me and
I can,
see
I
me,
can
we're fine.
I can hear you and see you great.
Okay.
So, so we are in Corinth. It's a very familiar, great place for Paul. Probably,
International place.
yeah, probably writes these letters here, and he's planning something. Because he wants Titus to come up to Nicopolis, and that's where he's planning on wintering. And we really think that he's wintering there because as soon as traveling weather breaks, meaning they can travel, he's going to Spain. And but he's also doing something else though, because not only is he getting ready to go to Spain, but he wants to go a little bit north. He wants to go up a little bit to the coast. So you want to talk a little bit about his northern possibilities?
Sure. Uh, what we're talking about is switching, and in Corinth you can easily do it, switching from the Aegean Sea to the Adriatic Sea over to the west. In that Greece has two coasts, if you will. He's been on the east coast of Greece while he's on what would be the west coast of the Aegean Sea. But with Corinth, there's a port on each end, one on the Aegean side and one on the Adriatic side. And he'd already been in Corinth writing the Romans about going to Spain, and the trip to Rome that he had planned was just a trip through Rome on his way to Spain. And he specifically mentions in the 15th chapter of Romans that he's coming through there to, raise resources again, and maybe pull some people to go with him to Spain from Rome. As with that million people population there, there may have been people that were interested and ready to go because Spain had quite a bit of active trade with the city of Rome itself and the Roman Empire. So uh, that was a ripe place to go. But on the way from the western port of Corinth, he would easily be able to take some coasters again and get up to Nicopolis. And I think I'm supposed to say more about Nicopolis next time, so I'm
Yeah.
going to save it a little there. But that was the place to be if you were on the west coast of Greece. It was founded by Julius Caesar. It was a fairly new city. It was Victory City, is what Nicopolis means in the Greek, and he really kind of moved people from some of the existing towns and built a whole new city from scratch, and it was a pretty amazing place. So exciting to be there, and that was a launching pad then on further north along the Adriatic, where Paul hadn't been possibly yet. And so we'll talk more about that and his destinations. And Titus, who in the letter to Titus, he invites to meet him in Nicopolis to winter there, along with the rest of whatever team was with him at the time, really to, I believe, uh, plant churches and, from there and on up north
Yeah.
on that coast. So it's exciting. But with the main uh, ministry launch as well of his Spanish tour. So from Nicopolis, you could start catching ships that could take you uh, at least part way there or all the way to Spain as it would work out. So again, exciting. Turning the page. Paul is at this point in Corinth. He's rested. He's reestablished relationships. He's made some new relationships, like with Colossae face to face. He's been all over the Aegean, and now uh, instead of thinking about the places he's been and the ministries that he founded, as he described in that letter to the Romans before, his ministries with people who haven't heard yet. That's what his real passion is and what his real call is, all the way back to when he was converted. And so he's looking to those places like uh, the Adriatic and where people don't know yet, and looking at Spain, where to his knowledge no one had been yet. So he's at it, and we've got more tomorrow on that.
And in your outline you're going to see that we really went over what would be B in the outline, and there we took pieces from everywhere else because we put some biographies in on some of the key players at this point, and we're not going to go over that. We're using that material as we talk through it. And we also, there's a nice little section that we've alluded to really in not only this lesson but the last lesson about how Paul's leadership style has changed throughout this, throughout his missionary journeys, throughout his life, really, where he's a little bit older and a lot bit wiser probably at this point in time, and he's really setting up the future of these churches when he knows he won't be there. And it's a that in itself is a fascinating study. But we end today basically with the the setup of being able to launch to his destination where he has had it in the stone, and basically when he wrote to Romans back, what would have been in 57 AD, and now
Yeah,
we're sitting there at 63 AD. It's just taken him a little bit of time to get there, but he's getting ready to go to Spain, and
unexpected detour, but mhm.
just a little bit,
Like,
unfortunately,
like all of us,
yeah,
life is what happens when you're making other plans, and
that's
he had
right.
other plans, and but wow, without the respite where we could benefit from the letter to the Philippians, as
Oh my
you've
goodness.
mentioned, the riches of Ephesians and the jewel that Philemon is. uh, all of that in the letter to the Colossians. Just some amazing stuff that came out of those times where he realized it could be redeemed in other ways, and he could reach out to people in other ways and use the media of the letter in that case. And now he's still big on face to face and being there to talk to people about Jesus, and Messiah's come, and Messiah's here, and so this is that exciting spot he's in.
And there we go. So, with that, I am absolutely sure that if I say you're going to use the prayer Bible, you will use something else. And if I
No,
say
today you can say that.
I
Say it.
can say that? Okay. So why don't you introduce the prayer Bible and what you got for us today?
You bet. By the way, Prayer Bible by Elmer Towns and Roy Zook, just a great resource. It's a translation itself. Sometimes the the words are translated into a prayer, which is fascinating itself. But then there are prayers along the way for the reader to pray. And I picked three out of the book of Titus that were about Titus's. Um, his mission that he was given, and it'll come clear as we pray this together and we pray this for each other. And sometimes we realize through Jesus Christ that there's a whole different way to live, and how do you get other people on board? And you first, well, you kind of got to get yourself on board and realize in your own humility you got some issues and some baggage to work with yourself, and then how do you share with others so it's not more pointing the finger. So I'll pray this through and you'll see how that moves through those different things about it. But it's from the book of Titus, that the prayers that they provide us here. uh, Paul wants Titus to set in order or straighten out the church at Crete, uh, quote unquote. Uh, Outward order begins with inward discipline. So Paul exhorts self discipline for the people there, the new converts. So we must pray for self discipline as well, because controlling ourselves is the first order of business in bringing order to any situation. Lord, I want to be more disciplined. Show me why I have difficulty controlling myself. Then give me the strength of Christ to bring into control, into your control, my mind, appetite, actions, and reactions to other people. Sometimes we must correct others. Realizing that most people do not like to be corrected, we should begin with prayer, praying for the ones we've corrected to receive best uh, our best intentions. Uh, we should pray for us to have the right attitude, the right words to be a part of their lives. We should pray for the problem that we are correcting, because there's more people, no doubt, involved. And pray for God to be glorified in the process of the correcting. Lord, I don't like to correct other people. Give me grace and humility to do it. Bless me when I correct others, so that you are glorified and that the problems are resolved, redeemed. And then the gospel is based on hope for a better future. And so Paul has hope for the church on the island of Crete. And he leaves Titus there to bring that hope. And is not hope the antidote for most or all of our problems? We need hope that God will straighten out our family and our vocation problems. We need hope that in our life we can see things straighten out so we can do what we ought to be able to do for the Lord. Then we need hope of a better life on earth and hope for life with Jesus after the grave. Lord, thank you for giving me hope for a better life. Now we're motivated to learn and discipline ourselves to serving you. Now my life and our lives can be a testimony to others and bring glory to you. Thank you for hope beyond the grave, for I know I will spend eternity with you. It's in Jesus' name that we pray all these things. Amen.
And well, tomorrow or the next session, whenever that is, we will go to Spain.
España.
There you go. Well, with that, God bless y'all, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Chris. God bless.